losing some people along the way here, but session 7. Tonight what we're going to do is we're going to continue our study of verbs, and we're going to take a look at the Greek verb in all of its glory tonight a little bit. The past tense of the Greek verb, imperfect, perfect, and aorist. But before we do that, let's take a look at these words, and let's just, if you know the word, just shout it out, the first one, and if you know the word, say it and tell me what the meaning is. First word there, right here, first word. Okay, exerchomai, what is it?
X? That looks like the Z.
That is.
We pronounce it X.
Yeah, exerchomai.
Exerchomai means I go out.
Go out, good. Okay. Next word here?
Laleo.
Laleo.
Means, I speak.
Okay, I speak. Okay. Next word?
Mathetes.
Mathetes. Yeah, mathetes. Yes. Which is?
Disciple.
Disciple. Good. The first and second column? A. Or it can mean a greeting in Maine. No. You'll never forget that, will you?
No.
I know that word. All right, the second word, second column. Lambano, which is I take or receive. The third word? Meta.
Meta.
With. Good, okay. Next word, third column. Hemera.
Hemera, right.
Hemera. Remember the rough breathing? Hemera, which is what? A day. Okay, next word. You should all know that one. Logos. Word. Next word. Oida. I know. Okay, and the last word. Thello. Thello. I wish or I decide. Good. Okay. Yeah, keep working at it. Just keep working at it. You know, it's one of those things in language, you just have to memorize certain words, and you just have to keep working at this. Okay. Now, yeah, you'll forget them. Romans 10, 9 and 10. Actually, this is in your notes, but in phrasing that out, let me show you the phrasing that we've worked on now. That's from last week and the week before. Romans 10, 9 and 10. Because, or that, if you confess with your mouth, Jesus is Lord, Iesun Kurion, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. It is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. And if you recall, last week we kind of unpacked this a bit, and we said that this is the main thought. Jesus is Lord, God raised him from the dead. Everything hangs on those two phrases, those two thoughts. And tonight, well, we're going to answer your question as to what does Lord mean here? When Paul says Jesus is Lord, what is he saying? What does he mean? We're going to actually answer that tonight. So we'll get there, but not right now. So we want to take a look at verbs tonight. This is chapter 17 in your books, and if you want to follow along, and I should have said this earlier, just you can open your books to these, and what I'm trying to do is actually follow the text. Now, I'm not going to use every example the text uses or something, but if you actually want, you know, a hands-on book you can look at beside the screen, please do so. Page 157, chapter 17. Our second installment about verbs. Verbs are, in Greek especially, they are the heart of translation, the heart of the sentences and paragraphs that you will actually look at. So we're going to tonight take a look at past tenses. Now in English, past tenses can be a simple past. It's called punctiliar. That's just a fancy word for what? What does punctiliar mean, anybody?
point in time.
Yeah, a point in time, yeah. Just, you know, we'll use an example. Jesus got into the boat, right? At a point in time, stepped into the boat, okay? In English, we have the simple past, Carl studied, okay? Or the continuous past. How would you say that?
Carl has studied.
Okay, Carl has studied, or Carl was studying. Past tense, right? Obvious past tense. The present tense would be Carl is studying or studies, right? Okay, and or it could be Carl has studied, Carl has been studying. That's perfect tense, and we'll take a look at that as well. But past tenses, Greek tenses that normally indicate past time, or there are three of them. The imperfect tense, which is always continuous action in the past. Now, if you have your chart, and if you don't have one of these little charts, there's one on the card, and you take a look at your little chart here for imperfect active tense. It's the second column. Can you see that? Everybody see that? Imperfect active. Luo is the verb. See luo? Luo, I loose. Luo. Second column, eluon. That's the first person singular active imperfect active tense. The key to, and you'll see this in a little while, the key is you have this little epsilon before the stem. The difference between this is an A+ question tonight. What's the difference between imperfect and aorist? Because aorist also has the epsilon. See, if you take a look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns over, aorist, past tense, aorist means past. What's the difference between imperfect and aorist in terms of the form of the Greek? Anybody see anything?
Different ending.
What?
Different ending.
Different ending, especially what?
So,
Yeah, you said it.
on is for the imperfect.
It's the ending. The aorist has a sigma. See that sigma
Yeah,
there?
sigma, the on sigma.
The aorist always has. It has a beginning, epsilon,
Oh, okay.
usually, and the sigma. See, elusa. So when you see this in a sentence, you know that's aorist. But if you say eluon, you know that it's imperfect. No sa, no sigma. Now I know there's different persons, and as you go down the list and everything else. But I just want you to see that. Okay? Do you see that? Okay. You'll get it. It'll come.
Okay, aorist always has this sigma.
Yeah.
No matter where it is.
Okay, so imperfect means continuous action in the past. Carl was studying. Imperfect tense. Okay. Next, let's take a look at an example in the Bible. John 19, verse 3. They came up to him saying, this is at the scene before the crucifixion. Hail, King of the Jews, and struck him with their hands. The word struck. Okay, the word struck is translated in the New Revised Standard Version as they kept coming up to him and kept striking him on the face. Now, the reason why they translate it this way is because this is an imperfect tense. Repeated, continuous action. It's not, see, and this is why you can't tell, if you just read the Greek sentence, you didn't know, no history, no background, how many times do you think they hit him if you read this sentence? Once.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is they kept beating him, right? Now you can tell in the Greek language, if you know imperfect, see that it was a continuous past action. They kept beating him, kept striking him. All right. Yes.
I just wondered why did they not put that in the original, for like the ESV standard?
Yeah.
Why didn't they say kept on striking? Why did they just say struck? Or didn't
Because,
they agree?
I think because a proper way of translating it would be in the past tense. They struck him, but it's not like once. See, it's they, because we use that too. You know, even if somebody's beaten up, we say they beat him, right? But usually what that means is they kept pounding, right? Okay, so that's imperfect. And the Greek gives you a clue here as to that. All right. Other Greek tenses are aorist. It's called aorist, undefined action in the past. For instance, Carl studied last night. Now that doesn't tell you anything except that there was a point in time, or there was a time point or whatever that I studied. Right? It could have been an hour, could have been a minute, could have been all night long. Aorist tense. The imperfect tense, okay, let's see. Yeah, all right, aorist tense. All right, let's go on. Let's talk about imperfect tense use. There are several uses of the imperfect, and here is where page 158 is where we're going to start looking at it. Just because you have an imperfect tense, it's past, you know that much, it's going to be past. It's going to be continuous past. But you don't know exactly how to translate it, so there's several things that you can do. In general, it's an ongoing action that happened in the past. If you buy a commentary or a Bible dictionary, one of those, you might see the word progressive or durative. Durative is often used. That is an indication that it's an imperfect, continuous action, ongoing action in the past. All right. For instance, he taught his disciples. The King James says he taught his disciples. You and I know that that wasn't just what? Once, right? We know that it must have been continuously. And sure enough, it is. Didasco is the root word to teach. Now notice the form. Adidaskein. Say, adidaskein. See that? Epsilon plus an ending. There's no what in the end? No sigma. If there were a sigma, it would mean what? It would mean aorist, and it would probably mean, it would be undefined, or it would mean that at one point in time he got his disciples together and taught them. But it's imperfect, so it's continuous. And actually, the way you would translate that, this would be an interlinear jumble, was teaching for the disciples of him. See, if I took each word and kind of just put the English under it, that's what you would do. Now, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Gar is for. See that? You should, in fact, you should know all these words by now. Tous, the disciples. Mathetes, right? Disciples. Autu, of him. Right. His disciples. Right. For, and we would say, for he was teaching his disciples. That would be the better translation. The imperfect can also emphasize the beginning of past action. It's called an inceptive aorist, or an inceptive imperfect rather. The beginning of past action. For instance, Matthew 4:11. The scene is the temptation of Jesus. Angels came and began ministering to him. Now you need to know that there's no began in the Greek in that text. It actually says angels came and ministered to him. But the New International, I believe this is the NIV, knows that this is an imperfect tense, and it's an inceptive tense, or an ingressive they call it. It begins the beginning of the action. Okay? This is the verb. And you don't need to memorize this or anything, but just to point out, diakonu, diakonu. Verb, third person, imperfect, active, indicative, from diakoneo, to serve or minister. Again, the A goes with the alpha, see that? Without an ending there. Okay. You okay with that? Another use would be repeated past action called iterative. Luke 18:3. The widow. Remember the widow who came to the unjust judge? NIV translates it accurately. She kept coming to him. Now again, you need to know there is no kept in the Greek. She came to him is really what the Greek says, but because it's repeated past action, here's the verb, erketo. Erketo. Verb, third person singular, imperfect, middle indicative from erkomai. Now again, you don't have to memorize this or anything, and you might say, where in the world did they get this? But notice again, this is would be the past of the epsilon, and eto would indicate the passive or middle. Now, and you know, again, if you don't memorize that, but it's going to be imperfect. Now, I'm going to show you how you can tell that in this class. So you can say, well, how do you know that? Just because I'm smart? No.
What's the prefix for the ata?
Here?
What's that supposed to indicate?
That would be the like luo puts an epsilon in front of the lambda, right? This would be the derivative of the epsilon, the a. Okay. Yeah, this verb is fairly complicated, so don't. But I just wanted to show you a repeated past action. Okay, customary past actions called customary in the Bible dictionaries. Mark 15:6. Now it was the custom at the feast to release a prisoner. There is no Greek word for custom in the Bible, in that text. It just says now it was at the feast they were releasing, or he was releasing a prisoner. See, was releasing. Apeluen, from the verb apoluo. Again, you don't need to memorize this. Just note. Again, imperfect tense. Third person singular, imperfect, active, indicative. That's what, if you looked at a Greek lexicon, that's what it would say. Imperfect is the key word there. Imperfect. Okay, and then you need to decide by the context what kind of imperfect it is. We'll give you some practice. Page 159, he discusses on number 5, the imperfect can describe what a person wishes to do, voluntative, tries to do, see that? Or almost does. These are all Latin words, by the way, so a dead language, never mind. But imperfect can describe a desire, a wish. Galatians 1:13, I was persecuting the church of God. I was persecuting the church of God. The New American Standard says, I used to persecute the church of God. Paul's giving his testimony in Galatians chapter 1, and he's referring back to a past lifestyle, see? Lifestyle where he tried to persecute the church of God, never was successful, really, because God saved him. And that's the verb, a diokon, from the verb dioko, persecute, imperfect. All right. Now, before we go on, and questions on that. So the point is that what you're going to do is you're going to, use this book, and when you find an imperfect tense, you'll go through these 5 uses, and you'll say, okay, I wonder which one this text is referring to. You don't have to memorize this or anything. This would be kind of a reference thing. That's the way you use this. I didn't memorize this stuff either. So, that's why you reference it. That's why you have a book. So you can say, okay, this is imperfect. You can figure that out, let's say. What kind of imperfect? Go back to these pages and figure it out. Now, will people disagree with you? Yes, maybe. Because you might think it's repeated, iterative. Somebody else might think it's customary. See? So you'll have to look at the context and kind of debate that, pray about that, so on and so forth. But this gives you an idea how to use this. Okay, let's go on. Questions on that? Let's take a look at the aorist. Key thought here, and this is on page 160. Do not confuse the usual English action occurring at a single point in time. The tidal wave hit the boat. The punctiliar, there was a point in time where the tidal wave smacked against the boat. Okay? See, a lot of books will say, oh, it's past tense. That's sloppy English, by the way. What does that mean, past tense? Yeah, I understand that, but it doesn't tell you anything, really, does it? It doesn't tell you when it happened, it tells you it happened. And that's the point in Greek. In other words, it doesn't give you that precision that you think it is. Greek says nothing about the verb action except that it happened. Past tense. Aorist, it happened. Okay? It has to define that some other way. Interesting verse. We looked at the Mark passage. I don't know if you remember that or not, but Luke passage, parallel passage. If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Luke adds a word to Mark. Just to give you a little bit of history of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Mark is the earliest gospel, okay? Mark's the earliest. And what happens is that Mark says, if anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Luke adds the word daily as a clue in the Greek to modify the verb take up. Let me show you. Here's what it looks like in Greek. This is the word. Arato. Okay? Arato. And he adds the word daily, kath hemeron. So you know this word, daily. He adds that because this is aorist. If he didn't add that, you might think what? Right. See, if he didn't add, you do this daily, you might think there's a point in time when I do this. See, Mark uses different verb. Now, I didn't put that on the paper. You can look at your previous notes. But Luke, when he wrote this, wrote a past tense, aorist tense, but he said, well, wait a minute now. This is a dynamic thing, and you need to do this every day. So he adds the words daily, under the inspiration of God, so that you and I would get it.
What's the cost?
Which one?
Yeah, the kata.
This is according to kata.
Oh, that's kata.
Yeah, kata.
Whoa.
Kath hemeron. Kath hemeron. And there's an ellipsis. So, okay. That was in like lesson 1 or 2. Yeah. I don't know where that came from.
Okay.
Okay. Questions on that? Okay. See that? Uses of the aorist. Looks at an action as a whole without telling us anything about its precise nature. Constative. And Matthew 15:39, he got into the boat. You can't tell when he did that, except it was in the past sometime. stepped into the boat, got into the boat. Or Revelation 24, they reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Now, this is an interesting verb there. It's past tense, aorist. But the question is, what kind of past tense is it? It's continuous. You don't reign just like once, right? It's a period of time. Why would he put it, this is your theological question for the night, or one of them. Why would he put it in the past tense? Why would God put this in the past tense?
Because he wants us to know that it's a done deal.
Correct. Exactly right. Aorist indicates an action that's completed from God's point of view in most instances. Now I want you to look at the verb. Now I know you don't know this verb, don't worry about that, but I want you to look at the beginning, see? See the epsilon? And do you know why it's past? Because what? The ending, son. It has the sigma, see? From basiluo, this is the root, this is the stem. Abasiluson, aorist. Okay. Now, how do you know that? Well, you get out your trusty cheat chart, see, that every good student of Greek uses, and you say, wait a minute, okay, if you can figure out a little bit what the stem would be, and that's kind of right there together, those letters are together, you take a look at what's in front and what's following it, and you can pretty much figure out, using a chart, what it is. Another use is aorist can place emphasis on the beginning of a past action called ingressive. You don't need to memorize those or anything. The king was angry, Matthew 22:7. Actually, the king, the word means became furious. He didn't just get angry, he stayed angry. Became furious, but it's past tense. It can describe a timeless truth. Remember our word gnomic from gnome? End of the rainbow, gnome. Think of a gnome. Think of some little guy running around in a weird hat. Gnomes don't age. Right? Isn't that true? Gnomes don't age. You're actually talking about gnomes as if they exist. Well, it's...
How many gnomes do you know?
How many gnomes do you know? Okay.
You know this because you've known a gnome for a while?
No.
You didn't age.
All right, gnomic, timeless truth. For instance, and often English will translate it with a present tense to indicate an effect. 1 Peter 1:24. The grass withers and the flower falls. Now you might think that in the Greek, well, that's just a straight sentence. It should be present, right? Not so. This is the Greek. Exera, then, see? This, notice the beginning, and ex epicent. Now this is a hard word. Don't worry about that because this is like second conjunction. You don't know what that is. Don't worry about that. But look at the last word, falls. Ex epicent. Notice the epsilon beginning and the sigma, sen. It's aorist. Which is interesting because what it's saying there, and the reason why they use past tense is, what God is saying there is that this truth is always for all time. The grass withers and the flower falls. If he used a present tense, it would not convey the intensity of the thought. Timeless truth. The aorist can describe an action that will occur, stressing the event's certainty. Proleptic is what it's called. An action that will occur, for instance, Romans 8:30. Those whom he justified, he also glorified. Now, it's a very big theological statement there, but this is what it looks like. Those Edikiosin. Edikiosin, right? The dikio, this is the stem. Tutos kai edokoxen. Now, see, so I have trouble pronouncing it too, so don't worry about it. But I want you to notice something here. These are both aorist. The epsilon and the sigma. See the sigma sen? See that ending? And in the other verb too, glorified. Called proleptic aorist because of the certainty indicated there. Those he justified, he also glorified. Now, when does glorification happen? Anybody? At the resurrection, at when Jesus comes again. However, from God's point of view, it's a done deal. So he uses a past tense in the Greek language to indicate it's a done deal. Not future. You might think, well, it should be future. And it could be. But he uses past, inceptive, or proleptic, rather, aorist, to indicate certainty. Interesting, isn't it? Let's take a look at the perfect. Now, I know this is fast, but you'll go back and read this. This is on pages 162 and 163. In the English, we have a perfect tense. By adding has or have to an English past tense means the action happened in the past but has present implications. For instance, I have eaten and am not hungry. That's clear. Isn't that clear to us? I have eaten means I ate in the past, right? But it also means its continuing effect is now. So I can say I'm not hungry. I have eaten and I am not hungry. That's perfect tense. The Greek perfect tense, like English, describes an action that was brought to completion whose effects are felt in the present. Two uses. Okay, let's take a look at it. Sometimes emphasizing the action was completed. For instance, 2 Timothy 4:7, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race. This is what it looks like in Greek. This is the word good. These are the verbs. Okay. Now notice again why it's aorist. You have ego nismai. Ego nismai. I have fought. Past tense aorist. And then I have finished. I'm sorry. That's not aorist. That's perfect. Perfect tense. But you can see this especially in the last verb. The first verb is difficult, don't worry about that. But the last verb, tetaleka. Now if you take a look at your chart to the perfect tense, you'll notice that what it does is that it repeats the first couple letters, first couple letters of the stem. Teta, in this case, leka. Teleo is the verb. I have finished, teleo. That's the root of the verb. So teta leka, perfect tense. And again, your chart would clue you into that.
So you're saying whatever the verb is, it repeats part?
It repeats. What it does is that, notice in your chart, luo is the verb, lu is the stem, and what it does, it repeats that first letter plus the epsilon many times. See? Okay?
So whatever the verb is.
Whatever, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now there's odd verbs too, but this is a normal verb.
But then it's the same ending.
Yes.
The suffix.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Sometimes the perfect tense will emphasize the resulting state of affairs. Intensive is what it's called. Translated in English in the present tense, Luke 5:20, man, your sins are forgiven. Our translation says, friend, your sins are forgiven. Jesus didn't call the man friend. He just called him man. it wasn't that he was being disrespectful, he was just addressing him as a male, okay? Man, your sins are forgiven. And that tense is a perfect tense, stand is forgiven. Now, so how do you wrap your hands around this? Let's do some examples of grammatical categorizing. And I'm going to give you some homework in this, but we'll do 2 examples and we'll work on them together. Matthew 27:30. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. You tell me, what tense is that verb? Do you think?
Imperfect.
It is imperfect. Now, why did you say imperfect? Could have been aorist.
And again and again, it's continuous action.
Exactly, exactly. See, the clue to the verb was that this was a repeated action. And this is the verb in Greek, epteuton. So if you open your Greek Testament to Matthew 27:30, you can find this verb from teuto, epteuton. Imperfect. No sigma, see that? Okay. Imperfect repeated action. So I would go back to my pages with the imperfect tense and take a look, okay, which of the 5 is it? In this case, it was repeated action. It's fairly obvious it was. So it's imperfect past, but repeated action. And when you look at a commentary, they would say it's iterative imperfect. So now you know what that means. Okay? Let's do one together. Luke 3:9. Now you can take a look at this in your Greek Testaments or whatever you want to do. The axe is already laid at the root of the trees. The NIV actually deletes the word laid, but I'm going to give it to you because it's actually in there. The axe is laid at the root of the trees. Now, the verb is katai, and actually this is incorrect. There should be no space. Katai from kemai. Now, just from what you know, from what you can see, let's kind of work with this. What tense is the verb? The verb is katai from kemai. So what tense would the verb be? You have some choices. Present, future, aorist, imperfect, or perfect. So what would it be?
Present.
I think it's present.
Exactly. It is a present tense. Do you see why?
Nothing before it.
Huh?
There's no
letter
epsilon or nothing.
There's nothing before it, see? Right? Nothing before it. And nothing after it either. Now, what does the my indicate in the word? What does the my indicate? Anybody? Do you remember? It's passive or middle voice. Passive or middle voice. Okay, now, so the verb present tense. Now, what you do is you go back to chapter, where is that? Chapter 15, page 152 and 3. 152 and 153. So you have 6 choices. Let's walk through them, okay? So you open your book and you say, okay, now the axe is laid at the root of the trees. So let's work at this together. Number 1, sometimes a Greek present describes an action that happens immediately, has no real continuous nature. Does that refer to this? Does that, no. This is not just an action happens one time, right? Number 2, the Greek present can describe an ongoing action even though in real time the action does not last very long. What do you think? Yes or no? What do you guys think?
No.
Yes, that's correct.
See,
Now-
I'm thinking
well-
that the axe is laid, that it's been, more than one time it's laid there.
Okay, okay.
See, I'm
So
thinking
number
that-
three, you would go with number three. Some actions occur repeatedly, right? See, number three,
Oh, no.
some actions, but,
I think they only
But
have
isn't
one.
this is a quarter? They can describe an ongoing action, even though the real-time action doesn't last very long. I think that's the key right there.
Right. That's
But I
right.
think repeatedly, to me, repeatedly means it's gonna happen
Over and over again. See, the
See, I'm
difference.
thinking of one strike of an axe. I mean, if it's laid as the strike, I mean, I'm thinking
Yeah, but
English
it's on
translation.
point.
It's like Jesus, well, again, the context. Jesus is saying judgment is already here. The axe of judgment is already there. So it's not going to come back and forth. It's already there. But it's present tense. Action 4, customary habitual, it could be that. And number 5, sometimes your Greek present express a timeless fact. It's not that, and that's it. So it's probably number 2. It's a progressive present. And sure enough, it is. We have to pause. Okay, we're going to cut and take a break. Now, ask your questions to understanding. Okay, so let's go on. Let's continue our word study. Let me review, just take a minute to review for those of you who weren't here, and just to announce what we're going to be doing in the next weeks until the end is we're going to do a major word study of a major word every week. And so this is kind of our baptism into word studies, but you'll have kind of all this stuff that you can take home on great words, and you can use it in Bible studies and whatever else. All right. Remember, there's 4 steps. First step, choose the right word in English. When you get to a passage, don't use a paraphrased version to do word studies. It will not help you at all. Don't use the Message to do word studies. I mean, I like Peterson as well, but don't use it. Or Phillips or one of those. Use NIV, New American Standard, even King James. Choose the right word. Identify the Greek term. Identify the Greek term. Thirdly, discover the semantic range. We'll talk about that. Study the context. And study the context. Okay. Choosing the right English word, we phrase the verses. We look for repeated words, look for theological terms, words the verses seem to hang on, words translated differently in different translations. Get a different set of translations. If you come across a word translated differently, you know it's a key word. Romans 10, 9, and 10, that's kind of where we're camping. This is from last week. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. It is with your mouth that you confess and are saved. This is the King James Version. And this is the part, and we did this last week, the phrasing of the passage. And we decided together that there were 2 main phrases. Jesus is Lord, and God raised him from the dead. Okay. We okay so far? Rochelle raised the question, well, okay, then how are we going to decide? We saw that Lord was a key term. So we need to decide what that means. Raised him from the dead is also a key term. That's going to be up to you to do if you want to do that. Semantic range means all the meanings that a word could have. So, how do you find that out? Well, you can use a software program or an exhaustive concordance. Let me show you an exhaustive concordance. This is in our library. And you can buy these for a song at book sales. Go to an old library or something and you can get these for like 50 cents because they're trying to get rid of them. Oh yeah. It has, I don't know, 1,000 pages. I don't know how many
No, we
pages it
have
has.
one.
Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. You can use that, or you can use, this is without the cover, this is Young's Analytical Concordance, which is a little slimmer. Or you can use a software program. Now I'm going to show you a neat program here. If you go to ntgreek.net, ntgreek.net, I'm going to show you a really neat automatic way to solve all of your Greek problems. Isn't this great? All right, let me show it to you. Here it is. If you go there, you will actually open up, you can open up a passage, any passage you want in the New Testament. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in Romans 10, 9 and 10. And then, okay, there it is. Now, I want you to notice the bottom. See the bottom of the screen, everybody? If I put my pointer over that, it tells you exactly what these words mean. If, verb, second person, aorist active subjunctive, confess. See, isn't that cool? Now let's look at this. This is the term for Lord. Noun, accusative, masculine, singular. The Lord or master. See? So if you have a computer and you're connected to the internet, you can just like go to town. Yeah, I don't care if you do it. But what this allows you to do, and this is free. I mean, this is cool because it's free. What this allows you to do is this has the whole Greek New Testament in it. Type any passage in, and you can find out what each Greek word means. Now, the downside of that is if you don't know the background to Greek like we're trying to discuss, this won't help you a whole lot. Excuse me. It won't help you a whole lot. Okay. And let's see, here we go. For with the heart, verb, disbelieve, verb, third person, present, passive, indicative, singular, trust. Present, passive, indicative. Pisteuetai. It's passive because of the ending, but it's present. Pisteuo is the stem. Okay. But it's cool because you don't need to know anything. I mean, you need to know a little bit. You need to know what Greek words look like, but you can actually pull this stuff up and solve your problems. You can do this, you can do your studies, you can do your Bible studies this way. And you can have your English Bible open and you say, I wonder what that word is in the Greek. Go to this website and it will tell you. It's just a great tool.
Now we know it's
Yes.
What is that in English? What is that? This word you're on my head?
This word here, pisteuo, means to believe or trust.
Where is that in either one of these? Just that the man believeth unto.
Yeah. For with the heart, cardia is heart. For with the heart he believes unto righteousness. Okay, it's hard to see from there, and I know that's hard to see. Yeah, this is it's good. This is hard to see. Get on your computers and take a look. Yes.
It seems like an advantage of this over the concordance would be
Right.
that this gives you the actual
Yes.
use in the sentence
Yes.
with the proper ending, whereas with the concordance,
Yes.
it'll only give you the root word necessarily.
Exactly. Exactly. The concordance will give you pisteuo. I know you can't see that, but that's the word in the concordance, to believe. It won't give you this. You have to figure that out.
That's why.
It doesn't always give you third person, present, passive.
Right.
Singular.
This is the most complete side. I wish as a Greek student I had this and I went to seminary. I had to like labor over hours to figure this stuff out. Now you can just kind of type it in. This is a free site.
Because I use two different
Sure.
dictionaries.
Right.
And concordance to look up logos,
Right,
and I could not find, neither one of them told me exactly what.
right. Yeah, and so, and if you kind of know where a word is, you can type in whatever and find it. And it will give you, at least in that particular context, what the word is. Okay, isn't that cool?
No, it is.
All right.
Is there any more cheating tools that you got?
Oh,
I love
yeah.
these cheat sheets.
This is cool stuff. All right. The lexical form of the word is kurios. Kurios, Lord. It's kurion there, but it's kurios. It's noun, accusative, masculine, singular, as our Greek text showed us. And what you should do, really, so that you use these books that you got, you can look this up in the computer, but you should try to find it in your book, you know, in the old way. Simply because if your computer goes dead, you still need this. Don't tell Brent I said that, but if your computer goes dead, you know, you'll still need that. All right.
We can carry this, we can't carry a computer with us.
Well, actually, you can.
Well, yeah, right.
Isn't that right? Yeah, you can. You
Well, I can't because I'm not.
You can actually download this into a BlackBerry or into a little pocket computer, and you can type it up. Huh?
Well, can I do a phone call?
I think so. I don't know. You'll have to take a look at the site.
Appropriate program.
Yeah. But yeah, that's cool, isn't it? All right. So if you don't have a computer, you're probably going to run and buy. I need a computer to study Greek. All right. Semantic range. Now, if you take a look at an exhaustive concordance, the word Lord means these things. It could mean Lord, capital L-O-R-D, 600 times. This concordance says it's used. Master, 35 times. Lords, 32. Sir, 23. Masters or master, 6. Owner, 6. Lords, 3. Owners, 3. Belong to the Lord, He and His Majesty. That same word, in terms of the use in the New Testament, these are the choices. But you really don't know. That's the semantic range. You can check other translations. Well, if you check other translations, all translations use the term Lord in Romans 10, 9, and 10. All translations. That's good news. But you can do a little bit more. If you don't have a computer, you can buy for a song. These are also on used bookstores. Go to a seminary and ask if they have any things like Englishman's Greek Concordance. They'll say, "Yeah, you still use that?" And they'll sell to you for $1. But what this has is it has the whole listing of Greek words, and then where it's used in the New Testament, the word that's listed. So, in other words,
It's like English concordance, but it's a Greek concordance.
correct. Correct. So for instance, I open here to, well, that's bad.
Is it in alphabetical order?
Yeah, it's an Greek alphabetical order, so the word thuo means to kill. Thuo, which is, I know you can't see that, but in terms of the word thuo use, it has these uses from Matthew on through Revelation here. And they actually use that Greek term in those verses. So it's a step beyond your Strongs. It's a step beyond. It's a great tool. I use this throughout seminary, and you can, again, you can buy this for a song anymore because they don't really make them anymore. I guess they still do.
What do they
Englishman's
want?
Greek. What?
Hymns or contemporary or?
Say again?
You said you can buy them for songs.
Actually, in some places, if you sing it, they'll probably give it to you. Looking at every place in the New Testament where the same Greek word occurs, regardless of its translation. All right. For in-depth study, go to a real Greek lexicon. This is the standard. You cannot afford this. This lexicon, Greek-English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature by Danker. If you go to Amazon.com, they will sell you one for $150 or so. That's cheap. And don't buy it. Don't go out and buy it, unless you have money to spend. But you can use, this is the standard. This is kind of the premier. And the author comments on other lexicons in the book on chapter 24, so you can take a look at what he says about other stuff. Go to specialized word study text for a much more in-depth discussion. The Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. This is a one-volume thing, and it has all kinds of comments on the word Lord. And that's in your book too, on page, let me find it for you, I'll show you what it looks like. Page 216. 216. Kurios. This is from the Theological Dictionary of the New Testament by Bromley. It's a summary of Kittle's work. That doesn't mean anything to you. But when I was in seminary, we begged and died for a set of Kittle. It's a whole set of this kind of stuff. It takes a word and it exhaustively tells you what the word means, how it was used in the New Testament days and beyond. It's great. Okay? But before you do this, you need to figure it out for yourself before you go here, because your tendency will be, oh, okay, so I know what that means. Try to figure it out for yourself first. Okay? The set of you can buy a set of Kittle for $500. So, some other books that you'll see on sale. This is one I'm going to give it to you. Weiss, Word Studies in Greek New Testament, standard. Vinson's Word Studies. Robertson's Word Pictures. These are all standards, and you can buy them on sale. Understand you will receive the author's theology along with the term semantic range. Whatever these people believe is going to be in there along with the range of meanings. So you just need to understand that. That's why it's important for you, with the Spirit's help, as you study the text, to get the meaning you believe it means. And then check it with this. So, you look at the context. Decide what the term means, and this is in your book on page 207. You begin its concentric circles with the word. You go outward to the verse, the paragraph, the book, books by the same author, the whole New Testament, the Bible, extra-biblical sources. Now, this is the key. You need to understand that the further out you go from the word, what happens to your meaning? The less certain you become. Because a word used in some catacomb somewhere, extra-biblical source, is not necessarily what that word means there in that text.
At all.
At all. It may help, but sometimes not. Start at the inner circle and work out. Stop as soon as possible. I really like that in the book. Yes?
Brian did not tell you that. He wrote one to the promise and you done.
Okay. All right. Stop as soon as possible. The further from the center, the less certainty of proper understanding of the term. And Paul is not James or the Gospels, for instance. So a word in Paul will not necessarily have the same nuance of meaning as it does in James or in the Gospels. Same basic meaning, same word, different nuance of meaning. Okay? Why context is important. This sign, which is in your book, go children slow. Now, let me ask you, as grown-up adults, what could that sign mean?
For children.
There's children there, so drive slowly because there's children.
Okay, now how do you know that?
Experience?
Okay, yeah, I mean, right, most of you would agree. You slow down because there's children playing. Well, but it could mean, go, the children are slow. But it could mean that, right?
That goes throws things off.
Go, children slow. Okay, it could mean that. Or it could mean, go children, but slowly. Right? All right? Context, or go slow, there are children. Now, you and I know what this means because of experience, because of common sense, because we've seen these kind of signs over and over again, right? But if you come from another planet or another country and you see a sign like this, it could mean one of those three things.
That's like we're like, with the Greek, we're like that. We read that sign and we don't know the meaning because we're like from another planet
Right.
when we read the Greek sign.
Right. That's why you would work at it. I mean, yes, Ken.
And the whole thing is grammatically incorrect anyway.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
supposed to go slowly.
Yeah, it's terrible, but that's the way signs are made. I mean, this is a okay. Coming back to Lord in Romans 10:9 and 10, there's a connection between Lord and raised from the dead. You see that in your phrasing. So it means more than just sir. I mean, you can kind of see that right away. The connection is, okay, it's not just a compliment. Jesus is sir. It's actually, well, but Jesus is Lord, raised from the dead. They're parallel. So something else besides sir is meant there. So you can figure that out. Well, in verse 12, in Romans 10, context, we're coming out now from the word. If you take a look at the verses around us, you find out Jesus is Lord of all. So it's referring to his universal lordship. And in verse 13, Paul's actually quoting an Old Testament passage, Joel chapter 2, verse 32, where Lord is identified with Yahweh. That's really interesting. And in Romans 1:4, go out further, Paul wrote Romans, right? In Romans chapter 1, Lord is identified as Son of God in Romans chapter 1, verse 4. And in Philippians 2, another book that Paul wrote, all knees shall bow to the Lord Jesus Christ. Subjection. So, put all of that together, this is what we need to say. What does it mean to say Jesus is Lord? Minimally, I have to have a correct understanding of who Jesus is. I must believe Jesus was raised from the dead. I must believe he's Lord of all. And I must see he's, in fact, the risen Son of God. And I must submit to his lordship. From that word stuff. See that? And I got that not by looking at a commentary, see, but by looking at the context of how the word is used there in the Bible.
You know, I was just sitting here thinking, even in Spanish, the Spanish language, Señor,
Yeah,
and they use that for Lord
right,
as well as
Right.
Mr.
right,
Even that, so it's the same type thing. It's the context of what it is.
right. It's again how it's used in the context.
I mean, we think that it's simple because we have English, and it means a different thing to us when we say Lord as compared to Mr. or Sir.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's I think where our confusion comes in sometimes.
Right. You can also use, this is an additional tool you can go outside the Greek New Testament, and there's actually a Greek Old Testament. It's called the Septuagint. The Septuagint, I have a copy actually here. Septuagint, Greek and English Old Testament. It's Greek with English, but the point is, it's the Greek translation of the Old Testament in the Greek times. It actually began in 250 BC is when the Septuagint was begun and completed during the days of Jesus. It's the Greek translation of the Old Testament for Greek readers and hearers of the time, yes.
Am I getting confused? I thought that was what they kind of wrote their own book of law and added to it.
No, no. This.
What was that? Because there's this.
It's a Greek translation from Hebrew.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I'm getting confused though with the Torah,
The Torah.
and then they did something where they
Yes,
added this.
the Jewish scribes added to the Torah. I forget what it's called. 400 or 500 laws and everything else. Yeah, this is different than that.
What's
This-
the Talmud?
That would be the Talmud, right?
Talmud,
That's right, the Talmud.
Yeah, mud. I
Yeah,
remember.
that would be the Jewish addition to the Old Testament Torah. This is the simple translation of the Hebrew of the Old Testament into Greek. Because many people couldn't read Hebrew, so they translated into their language, which was Greek. Okay.
And how good a job did they do that?
That's a very, very good question. So-so. I mean, it was okay, but it was a popularized translation, really. Kind of flowing, a little bit of freedoms with some stuff, but it gives you, at least from their perspective, what they thought the Old Testament meant at the time. Yes, Rochelle?
So when like Stephen and Paul and all of them, they get on their recitation texts when they're before the court
Yes.
and stuff, are they reciting Greek or are they reciting Hebrew?
That excellent question. Are they reciting Greek or Hebrew? Yes. Sometimes, no, the answer is sometimes the New Testament writers will take the Hebrew from the Old Testament and quote it directly, translate, of course, to Greek, but will translate that directly. Sometimes they will take the Septuagint and put it into their speech.
Wait, when was the Septuagint?
250 BC is when it begun, ended during the time of Christ, AD 30.
Oh,
So sometimes when you read, our forefathers said, or it says, sometimes that is a direct quote from the Hebrew of the Old Testament. Sometimes it's the Septuagint. Many times
But they would have
there's...
had to know Hebrew.
What?
They would have had to know Hebrew.
Correct, yeah. Now, remember that most of the New Testament was written by people who knew Hebrew. I mean, Paul, right? A Pharisee. He was trained in Hebrew. He understood Hebrew. So Paul especially will take the Hebrew of the Old, put it into the New, of course, and put it into Greek. But many other times you will find them using the Septuagint as a convenient translation. Now, how do you know the difference? Well, if you had a Septuagint Greek Testament, say, you can buy these things, by the way, you can actually check whether that quote in the New Testament is from the Septuagint or from the Hebrew itself.
but the Septuagint, is that both the New and the Old and?
No. This is just Old Testament
yeah.
in Greek.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason why it's important in word studies is because it does give you a background flavor of the time. So, for instance, in the Septuagint, kurios is used to translate Jehovah, Yahweh. These little letters there, that's Hebrew, by the way. This is your first lesson of Hebrew. Which is Yahweh or Jehovah. It's actually Yahweh. And if we were proper Hebrew students, we couldn't pronounce this word. Every time you see this word in the Old Testament, you would say Adonai, because of the reverence associated with the word Jehovah.
And they didn't have vowels anyway.
Yes, they did.
Oh,
Yeah. I just didn't include them. Okay. So, and you read this from right to left. Yahweh. You say, how do you get that? Well, it's another time. All right. So, at least for Paul, and this is the conclusion, and I agree with the author, at least for Paul as a Jew, kurios meant deity. At least for Paul. It's hard to come to another conclusion. Okay. There are fallacies. Let me tell you what the fallacies in word studies are. Anachronism. Let me show you, and these are sometimes funny, but defining a Greek word using an English term derived from that Greek word. An example. Dunamis. You've all heard this, from which we get dynamite. So God's power is dynamite. This is an incorrect word study of dunamis. It's using the English derivative to get the meaning of the word. The author points out, I didn't put this on the slide, he says, so that means that God goes around blowing things up. No. You have to be careful. Now I know you've heard sermons on this. You've heard sermons that, well, God's power is like dynamite. Well, that may be okay if you say like dynamite, but if you say God's power is dynamite, what you're doing is using the English derivative to translate the Greek term. You can't do that. It's a fallacy. Etymological fallacy, this is a great word. Etymological. Etymology is a study of terms, study of words. If you work for Wycliffe, you would understand this. Using the parts of the word to put together a meaning. For instance, butterfly. An animal made up of butter that can fly.
My kids have asked me this before.
Yeah. I mean, doesn't this make sense? Butterfly. Okay. An animal made up of butter that can fly. Well, this is a fallacy. Okay? Now, therefore, another fallacy, and I'm glad he put this one in, metanoeo means to repent, but in some, actually many studies, it will say to change one's mind. That's all it means. That's wrong. Because the context of the New Testament means a lot more than that. It means to change our attitude, the heart, our desires, to sorrow for sin. That's all included in repentance. But if you just take this word alone without the context, you can say, oh, it means to change one's mind. And what that means is I can keep sinning against God all the time as long as I change my mind every once in a while. That's where, see that, so heresy actually could come from that. So an etymological fallacy. Okay, let me give you another one. Some Greek words do carry the meaning of its parts. For instance, eis erchomai, I've given you this word, means to go into. Now some say the word means to go into because it's a combination of eis, into, plus erchomai, go. But actually that's not true. The whole word means to go into, not just its parts. Now you might say, well, yeah, but its parts do mean that. Well, sometimes that's true, sometimes not. So you need to know the word. Context is a guide. I like this one. Words never change meaning over time fallacy. Gay. Well, we'll have a gay time. Now, if I were living in the 1920s, what would that mean?
Party.
Fun time, good time. But I live in the year 2007. What does it mean? Exactly. And as a matter of fact, my mother uses this, and with not the meaning of today. Well, let's have a gay time. Whoa, wait a minute. Nope. But from her, 82 years old, perspective, it means party, right? Today, nobody uses it that way.
What does the New Webster say? Anybody know? What the New Webster? What is it? What does it?
I don't know.
That'd be interesting to know.
I don't know. Another one, gossip. Really interesting. Originally, chatter of godparents at the christening of their baby. But if you do a study on gossip, you certainly don't mean that, right? What does gossip mean today?
Passing on possibly false information.
Yeah, slander. It's more slanderous. But originally it meant that. And if you go up to godparents today and say, "Oh, is you gossiping about your child or your godbaby?" They would say, "What?" Okay, gossip. The point is you need to define the term how it's used today. If you define from the Greek to the English and you don't pay attention to how the term is used today, you're going to be in trouble. You could say, well, back whenever, Webster wrote his English dictionary, that's what it meant. That may be the case, but it certainly doesn't mean that today. Don't teach that. Today we're going to study about having a gay time. Okay. Don't place too much weight on a single word. Pay attention to the larger unit and the context for the meaning. Theological concepts are bigger than single words, no matter how profound. Agape, the word for love. And the author has a whole lecture on his CD-ROM, which is in your book. And if you want to listen to it, it's pretty decent. But his contention is that we can understand agape not just by studying the Word, but by studying God Himself. So, okay. This is your homework. And this is on your sheets. Now, what I've done for you is I've given you the Greek, and I've underlined or whatever, italicized the words. I want you to tell me what they are. Read chapter 17 to 18 and 24 and do an exercise 4 or 6 on page 215. You'll have fun doing this. No vocab. Just keep working on your vocab. Any questions? You